Trying to execute a fitness regime while you have ADHD is a really frustrating experience. So I was diagnosed with ADHD about a year ago now. I'm just going on 33 years old, originally from Cork, Ireland. I actually work as a full-time online fitness coach, and I guess it's been an interesting journey for me where I didn't know for many years that fitness is actually for about a decade now. Fitness has been a hobby that I would say that is part passion, but it's also part me trying to self-regulate my energy, my dopamine levels, and basically a means of survival whilst having this illness, disorder, whatever you want to call it. So I wanted to give some tips and just some general observations on what I found helped me over the years, and what's also helped some of my clients who also have ADHD, because like tends to attract like. The way I communicate in social media tends to attracting clients who have a similar way of seeing the world or communicating as I do. And naturally enough, I have a lot of clients who have ADHD. So some of the things that have kind of worked for me and worked for them over the years, when it comes to nutrition, training, everything like that. So number one is externalizing whatever kind of process you're trying to follow, whether that be with your nutrition, your training, or so on. You need some kind of structured plan. You need it in an app on your phone, for example. That's what I do with my clients. You need to be tracking your nutrition. You need to be tracking your training. You need some kind of objective measure. The reason I'd say that is because with ADHD, we are horrible at self awareness in terms of our energy levels and in regulating it, right? And at the end of the day, your training and your caloric intake to do with your food, those are all energy, right? You're expending energy when you're in the gym. You are consuming energy when you're consuming food. Trying to do this intuitively or to do it by feel, play it by ear, is not an approach that I think works, specifically if you're trying to get towards results. Now, to kind of contradict what I've just said, right? You need a plan, you need some form of structure, but we all know that we naturally try to rebel against structure. We need rules, we need structure, but we hate them. So what I like to do is I like to have a plan in place. And that's like, if I'm at my absolute worst, I can look at that and I can follow it, you know, as it's laid out. But there will be days where I need to kind of treat that as loose guidelines. Sometimes what I'll even do with my clients who have ADHD is I'll actually make two different plans for them, and they basically oscillate between them depending on how they feel, which are basically headed in the same direction towards the same goals. They're just two different ways of implementing it. That's what I found very helpful for myself, even, is to have like two copies of maybe like my general workday routine, right? Where maybe one day I'm completely slow moving in the morning and I follow one style of routine for my day. And then on another day, I wake up, everything is going smoothly, and I'm working from the get go, and then I train later in the evening, right? That's just an example. But have a plan, have a structure, but then know that you're kind of throwing it out and you can break the rules. You can kind of treat it more as guidelines, but you just need it there as an anchor. So I hope this is making sense, where it's like you plan you plan for the ideal scenario, but you know that you're never going to follow it completely, right? So like my whole job is to write programs for people, to write structure, and I cannot follow my own plans. Most weeks, I'm typically headed in that direction, but I'm never following it to the letter, because I just know that my cognition, my performance, my mood is just so variable, that it really would be a fool's errand, and it would just result in perfectionism of me trying to stick at that routine exactly as it's laid out. Um, the other thing that I found has helped, particularly on bad days with ADHD, is not wearing any headphones in the gym. This was something that I first heard about on the Huberman Labs podcast, where, while I definitely don't agree with everything he has to say about ADHD, but just in general about maintaining dopamine levels or managing them, I found that to be a very helpful tip. So, on days where I really need to get some mental bandwidth back after my workouts, maybe I've got, I don't know, a work session later in the evening, maybe I've got some sales calls. What I really need to do for those workouts is to ditch the headphones and really treat my workout as a meditation, because this is then restoring that executive function tank rather than depleting it if I'm training while listening to a podcast, while, amping myself up. It's, what they refer to as dopamine stacking, where you're basically getting all this stimulation, all this pleasure in one massive hit from multiple sources, and then you're completely drained of dopamine after your workout. Remember that we only really have one daily tank of dopamine or executive function, willpower, whatever you want to call it, where then once we drain it, we need to top it up, and we also need to make sure we're not draining it too quickly. So that's something I found helpful. Although when I post this in some of the ADHD fitness like subreddits, that's one that's gotten a lot of pushback. And I can understand why, because it's actually very difficult, I feel like, sometimes for someone with ADHD to get into the outside world rather than staying within the confines of their podcasts or music, or staying within our heads, basically. I know for me that when my ADHD is particularly bad, I will use YouTube video after YouTube video or Spotify playlist after playlist as like just a means of almost self-medication to drown out the other noise that's going on in the background in my head. So yeah, that's a helpful one, of ditching the headphones when you can. Now, I must mention as well that all these tips I'm giving you, I'm not really able to follow this unless I'm on some form of medication. So for me, that's been an SNRI called duloxetine for years, because I accidentally stumbled upon this as working really well for me long before I was diagnosed with ADHD, because I also have some nerve damage issues, peripheral nerve damage, and that absolutely derailed my life and made my ADHD just 10 times worse. Never found the cause, so personally, I actually think it's part of ADHD, because when you think about it, it's ADHD is an underdeveloped brain in certain areas, and obviously it would only make sense that there are some physical symptoms that go along with that, even though I never hear it really discussed. But for me anyway, that really helped, because that medication kind of serves two purposes, where it's like it increases norepinephrine, adrenaline, etc. But then also acts as a bit of pain relief for people with neuropathy. So it's often used for people who have nerve damage from diabetes or other health conditions. So that indirectly treated my ADHD for many years, and I've just kept it as a baseline. It helps with my social anxiety. It helps with just my energy in general. But then to actually treat the inattention, the mind that just goes a million miles an hour, that's where I really rely on Concerta. I probably wouldn't be making this video if I wasn't on Concerta right now. So the reason I say this is not because this is not health advice, it's not medical advice, it's not advice on medications. I just want to give that caveat for people who are beating themselves up if they still can't follow any of these tips. Like, I still need these lifestyle changes whilst on multiple medications. So just to put that out there. So this might seem like a very obvious one, but it's I think it's something that I've messed up on, and I've seen clients of mine mess up on it when they ignore the advice, which is to just pick the gym that's closest to you. You do not need the fancy bells and whistles of a sauna, steam room, all that kind of stuff. If your goal is focused on losing some weight, building some muscle mass, etc. If anything, I've actually found that with ADHD, I really like the quiet little mom and pop shop versions of gyms, right? The family owned ones where it's just old equipment, the meat and potatoes version of the gym. That's where I make my best progress because I'm not as distracted, right? Whereas when I'm in other gyms, let's imagine like commercial chains or things like that, where you have access to multiple locations, I almost feel like it takes up mental bandwidth in my life that I have to go and, I don't know, get use of the sauna or the steam room or whatever it is, or participate in some group classes, right? It's just spreading my focus laterally instead of like, taking the narrow path where you actually just focus on what you need to do to get the result you need to get to. Also, if your gym is a little bit too far away from you in terms of proximity, it just makes for you getting distracted on the way. And I know for myself that if I'm having a particularly bad day with my ADHD, I'll skip the gym and I won't realize that the reason I don't want to go is that subconsciously I know that I will probably get distracted on the way. It'll take way too much of my energy just to get there. And that's before I ever start any form of workout, right? So that's something to consider as well. I mean, I rent my apartment, for example. I don't own a property yet. And anytime I'm looking for an apartment, if I'm moving or whatever, I always find one that's in very close proximity to a gym. And I mean like a few blocks away, just because I know it's part of my life. I don't want to be taking a car there. I don't want to be spending too long walking there. I want to be able to get in and get out with as little friction as possible on a daily basis. Recording your exercise technique can really be helpful the odd time. No need to take a tripod or anything that requires too much of a setup, but one thing I have noticed for myself, because it's part of my job to be recording exercise tutorials for my online clients, is that I think in my head I'm performing an exercise really slow and controlled. Whereas when I watch it back, it's like I'm watching footage at 1.5 times speed, right? And I've noticed this with many of my ADHD clients, like all of them. They do the exercises way too fast. Their rest times are way shorter. It's like watching a hummingbird in the gym and completely unaware of it, same way I am. So, if you can record your exercise technique, this can be really helpful actually in just knowing how you're performing the exercises, and then just like trying to make yourself consciously aware of how much you need to slow down. Okay, this is more of a general mindset thing, but I definitely try not to compare yourself to other people as much as you can. And I know that's easier said than done, right? As much as we don't want to admit it, I do think that there is humans are are both collaborative and competitive, right? We like to, I guess, show that we have more money, bigger muscles, and nicer clothes, etc. It's a way we kind of peacock like other animals, right? And the gym is definitely no exception to that. You'll see people on Instagram, myself included, showing off physiques. And honestly, the progress I've made in the past decade, I've seen other people make that within a year or 2 years. And as a coach who knows quite a lot about fitness, about nutrition, it's kind of embarrassing at times. But that's where I would say you have to remember that you're fighting probably a bigger battle than most people are. You do have a performance disorder. It does make anything that's more structured and goal oriented more challenging. So, what I would suggest is just simply compare yourself to who you were previously. Like, keep a log of your training. And again, this goes back to tracking everything, because there's nothing better than me looking back and saying, at one point I was benching 40 kilos, and now I can do a 1 rep max for 110, right? Now, again, if I compare that to other people in my field, other people who've been training as long as me, I could get really depressed really quick. But if I just compare it to who I was previously, that really helps me. Because the thing you have to think about as well with ADHD, we're such lateral thinkers, and we really like to obsess over the finer details across multiple topics at once. Is that naturally means that you're going to be less effective at taking the straight path when it comes to something like, I don't know, gaining muscle, losing weight, etc. But if you can get there, and if you can, I don't know, after 10, 15 years, craft a really impressive physique, you're also just going to be such a worldly individual because you've got so many more interests across multiple topics, and you're not just some meathead in the gym. Okay, so be patient with yourself, understand that your brain operates somewhat differently, and just compare yourself to who you were previously. And I guess that kind of dovetails with what would be called a growth mindset. I'm a big fan of that, by, I think it's Carol Dweck, I think is the woman who wrote that book, Mindset. Typical ADHD, I've read about a chapter and then the book just sits there on the nightstand. But in general, the concept, I'm pretty much on board with it. And I think it's essential for someone with ADHD where we do struggle that bit more. You might not smash the 12 to 16 week plan that you set out for yourself and get the physique you really wanted. But if you can just extend that time horizon a bit further, and maybe it takes you a year to get there, but within that year, you've learned so much about the gym, fitness, and nutrition that you're really well equipped to handle your health and fitness for the rest of your life. Whereas other people might absolutely smash a 12-week cutting phase, for example, but then they're on this constant loop of paying for personal trainers, for I don't know, like gaining all the weight back and then having to lose it again. I see this time and time again where the people who are good at implementation aren't necessarily the same people who understand how things work. It's typically the people who struggle quite a lot, but take the time to obsess and learn absolutely everything there is to learn about whatever they're trying to achieve, who in the end, years later, benefit quite a lot more. And I really do think that is the case for some folks with ADHD, where we can hyper focus on fitness and nutrition, learn everything there is to know, and then we're able to actually manage our fitness a lot better than other people of our own age. For example, when we get into our 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. I hope you found this helpful. This is really my first YouTube video where I talk about anything to do with ADHD. I'm actually a little bit nervous speaking about it because it's just one of these things that gets, a mixed reaction from different people. Some people are fully on board, they're very empathetic. Other people don't believe it exists. And I think actually the worst is people who have a very mild form of ADHD who then say it's actually a superpower, right? I think there's such a spectrum to this disorder, and there are so many people who, some people could become phenomenal creators, entrepreneurs, kill it in their fitness goals because they have ADHD, while other people may really struggle with just the bare basics in life. So no matter where you're at with this, really do be compassionate with yourself. Only compare yourself to who you were previously. And if there's anything I can help out with, you can find me on Instagram at MixerLinehan. You can also email me. It's michael@michael-linehan.com. I'll leave these links in the description. Feel free to reach out. And if there's anything I can help with to do with fitness for someone with ADHD, or just a general chat about this topic, more than happy to do so. I should mention though that anyone I do work with, I always just tell them from the outset that I'm not trying to help you improve your ADHD, whilst I do think that certain considerations for trying to follow a fitness or nutrition plan need to be in place for those who do have ADHD. So, yeah, I can't recommend it enough to get into health and fitness, to really try and conquer this area of your life. It's really helped me self regulate. Fitness has always been that like anchor in my life where if I feel like my life is just spiraling out of control and I'm falling down a well where there's just nothing to grab onto, no ladder back up, fitness has been that thing that's helped me take back control in my life. It's provided some structure, some goals to work towards without so much thinking involved, that I just, don't start at all, right? So, fitness is thankfully one of these things that can really help someone with ADHD. But I will add that caveat that I probably wouldn't be able to follow any of this advice prior to getting some help for my condition initially. Now, for some people, that's going to be medication. For other people, it's going to be different lifestyle interventions, natural remedies, whatever. What I will say is that just don't beat yourself up if you're not able to follow these tips. Okay? Get back to them when you're in the right mindset to do so. Best of luck, and I'll try and be a bit more structured in these videos in future. It's been a long time since I've done anything long form oriented on YouTube. So have a great weekend, and hopefully you'll see me on here soon again.